Hi guys and welcome to my channel. I'm Alina Ghost and we are a bilingual family living in the UK in the outskirts of London. So it's just between Greater London and Essex. Quickly, in terms of my background, my roots are Russian. I was born in Russia, Moscow. I moved when I was 1 year old and I lived in Israel for about 6-7 years. So I used to know Hebrew, but I don't anymore. And I moved to the UK with my family at just before my 8th birthday actually. So basically I speak to my son, who is 2 years old, both in English and Russian. I try to speak in Russian, but let's go into that this video. I know that a lot of you are actually watching a lot of my content because you're interested how this whole bilingual life and living works, how to do it if you're the only parent speaking in a particular language. So I'll go into that in a second. Before I do, if you like this video, please do give me a thumbs up. It means the world to me. It also helps my content. I actually do this in my spare time. So thank you so much for watching. And if you want to watch more videos, please feel free to subscribe. I'd love to have you with us. Okay, so let's start with the situation that we're in. My son is coming up to his 3rd birthday, so for 3 years now, I have consciously took the decision to speak to him only in Russian. So there are a few different types of way to teach children, especially from an early age, a number of languages. So if you wanted to watch my video on that, I did that a while ago. So I'll make sure to link that down below for you guys. Essentially, the option that I chose is me speaking to my son only in Russian as much as possible. Obviously it's a lot harder than it just seems, but essentially what I've been doing is reading to him in Russian. I translate on the go as much as I can, especially like little simple books, translate into Russian even though it says it in English. We've been watching Russian TV, especially Russian Peppa Pig. Absolutely love that video, or those videos on YouTube. What else have we done? We played games. I obviously, whenever I interact, especially at home, I have been speaking to him only in Russian. Yes, my husband is English, so that is his one and only language. However, I'll speak about the benefits around speaking to my child in 2 languages as well, because it does help on my partner's side of things as well. I must admit that recently, especially when we're outside of the house, I don't feel comfortable enough to speak Russian. And no, it is not because I'm not comfortable speaking Russian, it is because I'm not comfortable with what is happening around the world. I am very conscious about prejudice against my child if somebody was to find out that he's potentially with a Russian background. Yes, it's very sad. Unfortunately, I've heard some horror stories, so that sort of sits at the back of my mind. So if you're wondering when we're going out and about, so for example, my last vlog that I did around going to a farm, which was amazing by the way and totally recommend, I found that I would speak to him in English, not only for you guys to understand on the camera, but also because I'm a little bit like conscious about speaking Russian in public as well. So I think from that point of view, it's a little bit annoying to me, because I know the more Russian I speak to him, no matter where we are, whether it's inside the house or outside the house, that it will obviously do him good. However, due to the situations out of my control, I just want to make sure that my son is as safe as possible. Apart from that, I have done so well as a parent, if I do say so myself, to speak to him only in Russian wherever I can. I have learnt so much myself, because obviously as I was 1 and left the country, I wasn't brought up in Russia, so my own language skill in Russian isn't as good as it is in English. English is pretty much my language, but basically with Russian I do tend to ask Alexa for a lot of things. So I'm like, Alexa, how do you say this in Russian? A lot of the time what I found as well is that my mind would remember in a particular situation, a particular phrase or word, and I'll be like, wow, where did that come from? So it's totally ingrained in my memory, in like my upbringing, because my parents were both Russian, my whole family was Russian, We were always forced to speak Russian at home as a whole family and my sister. So I think these things actually come up, and within that 3 years I've definitely found that my vocabulary got a lot better, and I'm so thankful for that as well. So not only is my son learning the Russian language, but also me as well. So let's move on to how my son is doing. There's a lot of myth around bilingual children and how they don't actually do that well in language development, especially in the early days. However, my son is passing with flying colours. Touch wood, his speech, so he is such a blabbermouth. He chats away. He loves a good chat, especially in English. I'm not gonna beat about the bush. He is very much dominant in English. English is his language, but so is mine. So he does prefer to say in English, and sometimes what I find he does is that he might start something with Russian or repeats a word in Russian that I have said in order to start a conversation, and he's like, he doesn't actually know the word for that in Russian still, so he would use an English word, so he'll grab it that way. However, if you want to have a look at like the myths of bilingualism as well, so make sure to check my video on that out as well. Thing that they say is that kids actually confuse words, but that is not true. So the reason that they might be using 2 or 3 languages in the one sentence is because they find it's the easiest thing to say, and is not because they are confused about what word is which, if that makes sense. So basically I feel like he's developed really well. Preschool have like ticked his behavior, or rather speech development in that sense. Don't get me started on the behavior side of things, because he's a very boisterous little boy, which we are working on his impulses at the moment. But in terms of speech, he's doing really well. Someone I used to compare my son to is my 2 nieces, who are also in a bilingual family. So my sister's teaching them Russian, and I thought because at least one of them had quite a lot of trouble with the language side of things, actually we're finding that now even in English she still has some speech problems, or rather like a lisp. So she's going to an actual speech therapist, so it's not necessarily to do with language. So what I'm trying to say is that it's still worth teaching your children 2 languages. They A, don't get confused, B, in my personal experience, I do not find that caused us to have a lack of development in the speech language. So yeah, keep doing it, and I very much recommend that you continue teaching them another language. Something that I mentioned quickly is the fact that we're using like YouTube, we're using books and things like that to actually learn Russian at home. Apart from that, because we are playing and we're speaking that language, I find that he remembers certain things that he does with me, and he remembers it in Russian. So potentially he might not even know the English word, or the fact that it's because he associates that activity with mummy that he says it in my language as well. Something recently he started to do is also translate for daddy. So if daddy's like, huh, what did you say? Or for example, I said something in Russian to him, and then daddy's like, what did she say? He would then translate it to him, which is amazing, and I wish I can catch it on camera. But the fact is, like, at the moment there's such rare occurrences, and the fact that it's within us doing an activity or play, you don't want to like get them to repeat it and to force the situation, because it's not about that. But one day I'm sure that when I'm vlogging or something like that, you will get to see it. I find that the more time I spend with my son, the more he learns Russian, or more he uses the language. So that is no surprise there. So for example, because he goes to preschool, which is English, he goes to nannies and granddads for part of the week as well, so they're English too. I find that when it comes to the weekends and he spends a lot more time with me, so for example it's just 2 days, or when he's on half term and he spends a little bit more time with me, or like holidays, I do find that his language does get a lot more use. So not the fact that he has learnt more, but the fact that he starts to use Russian more, which is quite cool and really interesting. But no surprise, because obviously the more the language is used and more it's in practice, the more likely they are to use that language. I am basically his personal translator. Whenever he says something in English, I try and repeat it again in Russian. Or whenever we're doing something, if I say something in English, I will also try to say it in Russian as well. Especially because I personally find it a little bit easier, and the fact that when it comes to like the Russian side of things, I have to think a little bit longer, and I'm like, okay, so this is what I'm trying to say, and this is the sentence structure, you know, that kind of stuff. So I am basically his translator, and it's amazing because I find that he then can translate himself as well. The other thing to think about is like what events in your culture. So it's not only about the language. Actually, a recent study that I've read is about the fact that when you use a particular language, it actually might change your like culture or beliefs or also personality. Isn't that amazing? So when you're using a particular language, your personality might change towards that language. And I personally do agree, because it takes a little bit longer for me to structure my sentences or to speak in Russian, I do find that I'm a little bit more shy, so that does change my personality in that way. But I don't remember why I started telling you this. Oh, I was going to say that when you are trying to get them involved in the language and the culture, it also is about like events. For example, in Russia, especially because my mum is Russian Orthodox, we would celebrate a lot of those like big like Russian events, or like, you know, not just religious, but the fact that those religious bits are actually encompassed within the culture of Russian culture, for example. So like celebrating Russian Christmas, which is the beginning of January rather than at the end of December. So we've sort of got like double celebrations, and they're not huge. It just means going and speaking to my Russian family. So I don't see them as much as I see my husband's family day to day, but because of these events, we make sure to meet up and do stuff. So for example, we go and see my mum for Russian Christmas and things like that. So that is a better excuse, or more of an excuse, to basically see the people that might affect the language and the culture as well. The event that we recently did is actually something to do with a language school, which we're hoping to start in September. So I'm hoping to send my son to Saturday classes for Russian specifically. So there's a whole Russian community in that language school, and they invited us to something called Maslonka, which is an event, like a Russian event as well. So we ended up going to this whole community. There was a hall, there was Russian food, there was songs, there was poetry, loads of other kids as well with either Russian families or like a mix. It was amazing, and we really enjoyed it. And the idea is the fact that you are immersed within that community and that bubble to learn that language more, which is obviously like alongside like the culture. As I mentioned, I want to send him to school regularly so that he learns the Russian language. So something that they can teach him is like in school, like preschool and stuff, is alphabet, counting. Hopefully he already knows all those things, but it's just like making sure that he gets to practice even more with that, and he does it within that Russian community as well. Something that I would really love to do in the next year is to actually create like a folder or book or like a section in his room for Russian specifically, for a little bit of like homeschooling. I know I might not get lots of time to do it, but I think it's really important for us to actually have a folder that we can flip through potentially, where we can learn and talk about these things, like all in Russian, obviously, whether it's the alphabet, whether it's animals, whether it's things. Obviously, we've got plenty of Russian books that we use as well and read and do all of this stuff too, but putting it in a folder just makes it a little bit more official and like gives him a little bit more motivation, hopefully. So I can be like, if you complete this section, maybe you'll get a treat at the end of it. So I've not thought about it too much, and if you've got any ideas, I'd love to hear them. So make sure to comment down below. But essentially, that is my plan for the coming year. So something that I mentioned earlier is the fact that I want to speak about the benefits of bilingualism and being a bilingual family. Firstly, knowing more than one language is amazing. Like the fact that my son is able to communicate to me in another language actually baffles my husband a little bit, and like really is an amazing thing where you can actually communicate to more people around the world, which is awesome. A great skill, something that he can actually nurture in the future if he wanted to. My plan is simply to give him the basic knowledge that he needs to do to pass his GCSEs, if they're still around then. Basically to have some sort of like education, and then he can do something with it, whether like maybe he wants to travel, you know, you never know. So the idea is the fact that you know more languages, like doors open for you. Maybe he wants to be a translator, for goodness sake, so who knows. So that is a great benefit. So future skills and the ability to open up more doors in life. Another benefit is the fact that my husband has learned so much Russian in the past 3 years that he has done before then, and we've been together for more than 10 years. Like this year will be coming up to 16 years together. So the fact that he's learned the most in the past 3 years really shows you the fact that like speaking it over and over again, like practicing it, really makes a difference, and not only for the child but also for the parents as well. I already mentioned the fact that it was amazing to be able to remember and have these like memories and language, like words to basically appear in my mind, to resurface that. Obviously Alexa helped a lot, and the fact that I've been practicing rolling my R's. I do feel like with practice, with the fact that I've like decided, right, I'm going to roll my R's, I'm going to keep that muscle going no matter how silly I sound, I actually feel like I sound a lot better than I did before. Yes, it's not as amazing or as like innate as somebody else would have in Russia, but the fact that I can roll my R's, at least for most words in Russian, I'm really happy with that. Basically, if I give my son a base level of the language, my mission here is complete, and I'll be so darn happy. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you liked the update, and like if you are following us because of our bilingualism, do let me know. Maybe I'll do some more vlogs around that, maybe a little bit more like educational videos if you are interested. Like absolutely happy to share my experience, and so far I have not regretted ever to teach my child 2 languages. It's been an amazing journey. I'm so thankful and grateful for the fact that I can offer this skill that essentially not anybody else can do. Anyway, so happy, very much recommend it. Hope that you guys get to do it as well, and don't let anybody stop you. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.